Thank you for joining us on our journey here to preserve the history of mixed martial arts. When I wanted to take on this project, I needed help. I brought in one of my favorite matchmakers, Miguel Iturrate, and the MMA detective, Mike Davis. So to do this, we've been able to preserve history. Welcome and enjoy.
Welcome back to the Lights Out Podcast. My name is Mike Davis. Along with me this time, we've got Alberto Crane. Alberto, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Mike, for having me.
Absolutely. So, Alberto, why don't we start with the plugs? What do you got going on?
What do I have going on? Oh, man, we have our gym legacy in Burbank and Pasadena, and now Glendale as well. So we're growing and doing good work in the communities and, trying to change lives through martial arts. Not trying, but changing lives through martial arts.
Absolutely. You also have a fantastic podcast.
Thank you.
Heavy jiu-jitsu, obviously. I think your last, John Combs was your last guest. He won the ADCC West Coast Trials. Please, it's called the Alberto Crane Show. I mean, it's
I love. It's a way for me to connect with my students and just people that I come in contact with, and it's very conversational, and it's nice because I get to share that conversation with my students and my community around the world. I'm also involved with TACFIT. We're the world's smartest workout. It's a recovery-based system, and it's really changed my life and really transformed my life. And, we've been doing it now for the last 6-7 years in the gym. It's a worldwide thing that's been around for actually since 1996, almost 26 years, something like that. It's been around for a while.
So you talk about recovery. You're talking about physical recovery, or are we talking about addiction?
I mean, physical recovery. So like mobility things, injuries, right? Recovery from injuries, but also it's also performance. It's not just recovery. It's also optimizing your performance. It's something I wish I would have had, when I was younger, training jiu-jitsu and MMA.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, your path is very unique. In fact, I don't think I've ever had anybody take the road that you have up until this point. So why don't we start from the beginning? You traveled quite a bit as a kid, and you settled down in a few different places. Why don't you talk about your growing up?
So my mom moved to Germany when I was about 4 years old, and spent most of my childhood in Germany, Munich, Germany. I had an amazing childhood there. And then my dad, my parents, separated when I was pretty young, and my dad moved to New York City. So when I became a teenager, I moved to New York City and lived out there during high school. So for about 5 years, and had a great time there. Just living in New York City as a teenager was pretty cool. And then after high school, I moved back to New Mexico. I've been going in and out of New Mexico. That's where my family's from. And so after high school, I got into jiu-jitsu. So I was 18 after high school. And one of my, close friends, best friends, Amal Easton, ended up going down to Brazil. He's had Elliot Marshall, a lot of UFC guys. And he has a Gracie black belt. And so he went down to Brazil first. And then he came back and we started training in his garage every day. And he showed me all these new techniques and just showed me all these things. And I blew my mind. And he took me to a couple tournaments that summer when he came back. And I just got so focused. I never looked back. And I wanted to be the best. And then I read a book called Think and Grow Rich, and then I wrote down my goals. And so I went all in. I wanted to be the best in jiu-jitsu. I never thought I would fight MMA. That was never in the plans, but one thing led to another. I got my black belt, and I guess I wanted to prove myself. I wanted to represent jiu-jitsu too in the cage. So it was in those days still of, people representing their martial art or their style.
Okay. So you mentioned, we break this down, but Amal Easton. So everybody like on the MMA world, because, that's primarily my audience. Amal Easton, he's the coach of like Brendan Schaub, Nate Marquardt. He's got, I think, about 6 or 7 facilities in the Colorado area. Not only is he like a very advanced teacher, but he's a brilliant businessman. Mm-hmm. So how did you guys meet?
So he's like an older brother. So we worked at this restaurant. It was called the Coyote Cafe in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And Amal worked there. And him and a few other guys were doing jujitsu at the time, and it took them about 4 or 5 months of trying to convince me to do a class. And so that's where I met him at the at the restaurant. And then after he came back from Brazil, we trained together. But then when he came back from Brazil and I started training in his garage, we became really close. He became pretty much like a big brother to me.
That's good. Wow, you couldn't pick a better person to just kind of get their thoughts on certain situations, and you guys have kind of mirrored each other in regards to your gyms and expansion of which.
For sure, he's been a mentor in every aspect to me. From jiu-jitsu to opening up my own gym, because I was pretty young when I started my first gym. I was about 23 years old, and I had no idea what I was doing, but I loved this stuff, and I wanted to keep training myself, and that was really pretty much the only way. Well, I started, and it grew really fast, so that's why I kept doing it, and then Amal was there to help me. But Amal has been there in every step of the way. So when I started fighting MMA, he was always there at my main MMA fights, jiu-jitsu, corner me, MMA, Japan, UFC. I mean, you name it, he's been there. King of the Cage, the big ones. He's always been there for me.
Absolutely. So you started traveling to Brazil as well. Do you live down there for an extended period of time?
I did. So I went down for 6 months at the beginning, and then my mom, I went back again for like another month because I was in competing, and they had the world championships and stuff in Rio de Janeiro at the time. That's where everything was at. And so to learn, you had to go down there. And then I went back another like a month after I came back, and my mom was like, "Listen, why don't you do another semester of college? And then after that, you can why don't you stay there for a year?" And I ended up staying for about 3 years. And because I wasn't done yet, I wrote down my goals, what I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. And so I fully committed. I had a credit card with a $20,000 credit limit. And so I wasn't done yet, and I had that credit card. So I just lived off the credit card for a good year and a half, and because I had some money saved. And then after I just came back with that $20,000 credit card debt, and I just started working and, and fully committed.
That's really the only way you're ever going to make it. Like you gotta be all in. Like if you got kind of one foot in, one foot out, you're never going to leave that. It's like a perpetual state. You're always going to be there. You're never going to commit yourself to leave.
For sure.
You hook up with Draculino, Gracie Barra. You're the first American black belt under the Gracie Barra system. Am I correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct. So the Gracie Barra lineage, the Gracie Barra Association, whatever it's pretty much probably the biggest Gracie association in the world. And so I was the first American black belt, and I'm very proud of my history, my lineage with my team.
Right. Did you open the first Gracie Barra here in the United States? Like
I didn't. No, there were some Brazilians, and my gym was called something else, but my students always represented, Gracie Barra at the tournaments.
That's
but
right.
My school is called, in New Mexico, it's called Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Academy, and then here in LA, it's called Legacy. And then I actually switched over because they started to do the franchising thing, and the Master Carlos Gracie asked me to come over, so that's what I did.
That's good. I think it was Santa Fe Jiu-Jitsu as well at one point.
Correct. Yeah, it was called Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or Santa Fe Jiu-Jitsu. Exactly.
Okay. It's did you wrestle in high school?
I wrestled when I was a little kid, but they didn't have wrestling in my school.
Oh.
So I actually played soccer because I grew up playing soccer. I wish I would have, but because I love grappling. I've loved grappling since I was a kid. So it would have been a perfect fit.
If you look at your single legs, it's not a traditional like jiu-jitsu based single leg. I thought for sure, I'm not saying you had a huge career in high school wrestling, but I thought for sure you at least had those roots.
Yeah. I mean, I've wrestled enough over the years, right? In my grappling and my jiu-jitsu, and then I fought MMA for a decade. So that put some reps in for sure.
Okay, let's talk about your first mixed martial arts fight. June 19th, 2002. How long have you been training up until this time? It's King of the Cage, kind of a big deal. Nick Shadwick.
Mm-hmm. So how did that go? So basically, King of the Cage, which was a big deal back in those days.
Huge
I mean,
deal.
they were competing with the UFC. They were kind of neck and neck, and so King of the Cage was coming to New Mexico. So I was like, wow, this is great. I think I'd like to try. I received my black belt, that year before. So I was like, I want to try this cage fighting stuff, see if this jiu-jitsu stuff works in there. So, I was friends with Greg Jackson, and I was like, hey, Greg, do you think I can get on this card? He's like, yeah, just give him a call. So I called him up, and they got me on the card. They got me on the undercard, yeah, I was like, cool, I'm on the card, and I was still competing heavy in pretty much gi jiu-jitsu. Of course, I did no gi too, but I was really competing at the highest levels in gi jiu-jitsu. So I fought, I think, in June, and I had a big tournament in Brazil in May, and then I had the Worlds in July. So it was like in between that I did my debut, and it was interesting, because it was the first time fighting in New Mexico. I competed all over the world, and here I was fighting in New Mexico. So I got to sell a lot of tickets.
Yeah.
And I asked them how much am I going to make? Whatever, is there a pay even, right? And he's like, yeah, sure. Maybe $300, $300 to fight. And I said, well, and he's like, well, you can make commission on the ticket sales. So I was like, okay, great. So I remember buying like $10,000 worth of tickets on my credit card. And so I went instantly.
Did they make you buy it up front?
They made me buy it up front, right? They didn't give you the tickets, at that casino, because I had to buy them from the casino. So it was a little bit different for that event back in those days, I guess, But I got, I bought $10,000 of tickets, and because I sold, it was that casino in New Mexico, how they had it set up. But because I got so many tickets and I sold so many tickets, I went instantly from the undercard to right next to the main event, so I was like the semi-main event, co-main event, pretty much. Dan Severn was the main event.
right. That's pretty wild. That's a lot to digest, but your competitive history in Brazil, you had mentioned that you competed quite a bit. What was it like being an outsider, an American, competing in Brazil at some of the biggest tournaments?
Yeah, it was an interesting time, right? Because in those days, jiu-jitsu and MMA were intertwined. Like all the top jiu-jitsu guys were fighting in MMA. Like all the Carlson Gracie guys, like Murilo Bustamante, UFC. I mean, everybody. Everybody that was anybody. They fought MMA, and they still competed actually in the gi with jiu-jitsu. So it was an interesting time. So I got to see all these guys, compete. And then how they treated me in Rio de Janeiro was interesting because, there's so many foreigners coming from all over the world to learn jiu-jitsu, right, from the source. And so I met Draculino in Rio because that's where he's from, but he actually moved to the third largest city called Belo Horizonte, they say. And so I ended up moving out there, and that's where I trained with him, because I felt like I was part of the team, and I felt like I was really, I was his student. He really gave his all to us, because we were his first generation of students, so he wanted to prove things with us, right? That he's good. He's a good teacher. And so in Rio de Janeiro, first they treated me, like they want, they didn't really want to,
like a tourist,
take me in. Yeah, like a tourist.
Yeah,
like
a
I'm just another gringo, another gringo. Amal Easton, he I think he was able to really connect with a lot of people, and so he ended up staying most of the time in Rio de Janeiro. But for me, I met Draculino, and because after I went to Belo Horizonte and with this team there, he was just starting out. There was just like all white belts and a couple blue belts. I just felt like I was part of the family, part of the team, and I just felt so welcome there. And it was a great decision because Gracie Barra in Rio de Janeiro, they had all the top black belts in the world at the time there, and Draculino's beginning, but Draculino's team ended up being one of the top gyms, in the world of jiu-jitsu. Yeah. So many black belt world champions over the years. Their legacy is just, I'm really proud to be the first group of black belts of his, and then just the school, the lineage that I come from.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of lineage, you mentioned Greg Jackson earlier. We're talking like 2002. So in essence, like the first group, I want to be respectful when I say this, and it's nothing to do with you. I think Greg Jackson's got like one of the hardest paths as a coach that I've ever seen anybody take. And I mean that with the utmost respect when I say that.
Mm-hmm,
so in essence, in 1993, you got a guy working in a video store, has never done jiu-jitsu tournaments, no, at least on record. I don't see any MMA fights. And he comes up with the martial art and he convinces people to try it. And he's got one of the greatest hubs in the entire world. There's nobody that's ever done that. And you were one of his first crop of people. It was like you, Keith Jardine. I got it written down here. Keith Jardine, Tom
Schulte, Diego
Sanchez.
Yeah. So, that's great, man. That's great. That's it. He called it Gaidojutsu, way of the street.
Gaidojutsu, yeah.
Gaidojutsu. So he would go around and he would get a lot of hate. And he had this guy named Chris Luttrell. I don't know if you ever did an interview with him, but he was a secret weapon, because he was a flight attendant for, I forgot what airline, but he actually would travel around and learn from like the different Brazilians, learn some jiu-jitsu and bring it back for him. And then of course, Greg, watch all the tapes, and he's just really smart. He studied judo books and everything else. And they would just test stuff and they would put themselves out there. But Chris Luttrell, I think he wrestled for UNM. So he, a lot of it, the Greg Jackson's like their ground and pound system, system is from Chris Luttrell. He fought like Yves Edwards in the early days and beat him up. Yeah. So I think what was the question about Greg Jackson?
Okay,
just not getting credit. Man, 100%. So we always joked, right? He's the was it the first, the easiest overnight success, 10-year overnight success, right? 10 years of grinding. And man, I love jiu-jitsu, but I didn't know, I wasn't sure if MMA would be, like a regular sport or a big time sport, because in those days we were fighting like kind of underground, at these casinos and these like for a couple $100 a fight. And he believed, and man, he grinded like for more than a decade, eating, sleeping at the gym, eating bologna sandwiches, whatever, to keep going, and because there was zero money, right? But he believed always in MMA, and it's a really beautiful story, and there was that movie, was it Warrior? Where they basically have like the classical music in the background, that trainer has that, he plays that, and that was based on him, right? And so it's really beautiful to see him kind of get his time, right? And being for being the top guy. All
right, in 2002, like you're not your average fighter. You're a guy that sets goals. You're obviously an avid reader. You speak multiple languages. In 2002, are you looking at Greg Jackson saying, man, this guy's really going to do it? Because I can't fathom anybody at that time just going, fuck yeah, this guy's, he's fresh out of the box. He's definitely looking at the situation through a fresh set of eyes. But like, I couldn't imagine putting my faith in something like that blowing up as big as it is, considering Greg Jackson is who he is today. Did you know that back at this time?
I trusted him, and he earned my trust. He would come up because of Chris Luttrell. He actually came up, but I didn't know about the sport. I didn't know if MMA was going to be as big as it became, right? And he was going to be in the forefront of that. But I did ask him in those early days, because he had all these fighters. He had his little babies being born, and he had all these, crazy fighters, and he took care of them, like kids, And I asked him, like, well, what's your goal with this? I was always goal oriented, And he's like, I just want to be known as, the best MMA coach in MMA. And so, and I think he really looked up to Pat Miletich at the time because he was the guy at that time. He had Matt Hughes, he had Tim Sylvia, he had all the guys, right, that were champions. Jeremy Horn,
Jess Pulver.
So Jens Pulver, exactly. So you had the full lineup, right? And so he's like, I want to be known as the best MMA coach. And then he said that, and I really, I was like, okay, cool. That's cool. I didn't really see it. Right. But he did.
Right.
Well, I don't think he did. I don't know if he really did, but he followed his heart. Right. He followed his heart. And it's really beautiful to see, with like years later, we were like at some random Bellator and I was like, man, you did it, because he was voted like best MMA coach of the year by multiple things, like so many. He had the who's who, right, from the George St. Pierre's to the John Jones to he had all the top people. It was like pretty much like Pat Miletich, right? But now is the Greg Jackson era, and New Mexico became a big old fight hub in the world.
It's insane. I was just in their gym about a month ago. It's impossible to get where he's at, and even harder to maintain it. With all the egos in a gym, there's such a balance. It's actually more difficult once you get there than it is to actually arrive. Incredibly impressive. Really is.
Yeah. I'm proud of, being a part of that too. Like I was their first MMA, champion, like, because King of the Cage was a big deal back then, right? Oh. And so winning a King of the Cage and, bringing a belt home to New Mexico, and that was a big deal. And it was on pay-per-view. The fight I won, to get the belt. And so it was, I'm very proud of the history with these guys in the early days, right? I mean, the place was tiny. Now it's like this big old building, right? But back in those days, it was like maybe 1,500 square feet full, the full thing. Some full, like, those foldable mats that you like have to fold out to train on. That was the gym. But Diego Sanchez, Keith Jardine, all these guys, all of us were training on those mats.
What was Diego like back in the day, in the early days?
Oh man, he was intense. He had an interesting background because he was a wrestler, and so one of the guys that I was friends with from Santa Fe, he beat him. I think he beat him in his senior year. I think it was maybe Henry's junior year. In the finals, he's like calling him out all year long, and he kind of beat him. And so he was an intense guy. So he was definitely always interesting and intense individual. And he really brought it. And I mean, shoot, he put Greg Jackson on the map with the Ultimate Fighter. And so it's just the perfect story, And he's New Mexico, he's a New Mexico boy. He's born and raised in New Mexico. He's from the 505. So it was even sweeter, right, to have a local boy, like, win the Ultimate Fighter and put Greg Jackson and the team on the map.
Yeah, cut his teeth in King of the Cage. So Nick Shadwick obviously won by rear naked choke. Joe Vigil, which is your second fight out of Team Phoenix, you win with a triangle. In that Joe Vigil fight, they bring in Vazquez. Vazquez, just so everybody understands at this point, he's on a 7-fight win streak. He beats Romina Sato in Japan. And there is no question that he's the number one guy in the world at 155 pounds. You're 2 fights in. What is kind of going through your mind at this point?
It's interesting. So I met him before my first fight. We were at the hotel.
Okay.
And people were walking around, and he walked around with his, pink shirt, and he had the belt around his, around his waist. We're just walking around at the hotel, and I'm very nice and very, like, kind of, just very, very kind. I try to be kind and nice to people when I meet them. And and so I just said, hello, how you doing? Introduced myself, and he was kind of, arrogant towards me. So like I was like, oh wow, okay. It's like that, like very arrogant towards me. I was like, okay. And so they told the matchmaker before I even did my first fight, like, I'd like to fight that guy.
Really?
Yeah. I was like, oh, I'm gonna get this guy. And so I didn't know what I was gonna. I just did one fight to do a fight, but because I sold so many tickets they wanted me to fight again, right? And so they had a second fight actually planned in October, but because I was like, they don't want to, I don't, it wasn't very interesting for me, but they said, listen, they asked me again. They tried to organize another one. They did organize another one in December. They're like, listen, if you fight in December, we'll give you a title shot against Javier Vazquez, because I think Javier Vazquez was going to jump over to the UFC at the time, so they were kind of like trying to like give him a tough matchup, Yeah. And so, that's how it started. And then, the Greg Jackson was being Greg Jackson back in those days. He's still Greg Jackson, very smart game planner. Yeah, he was in my corner. Mike Winklejohn and Amal Easton were in my corner. And so we trained. We had a training camp. I trained up in the mountains, all the stuff that you would see on all the promos for the UFC and stuff, like Carlos Condit training up in the mountains. We did all that stuff. And so I fought in December, won that fight with Vigil, and that gave me the title shot for February.
Yeah. And if you look at it, you're training with Greg Jackson, an absolute no name at this point. Like, nobody knows who he is. Amal Easton, obviously he had a name. Javi Vazquez is Rodrigo Medeiros, brown belt at the time. And he's training with like Eddie Bravo, Jean-Jacques Machado. So you're looking at a very high-end machine against a guy that's kind of relatively unknown in regards to the mixed martial arts circuit. It's like, you were a pretty big underdog.
Yeah, nobody thought I was going to do anything. And because, it was my second fight, he had a lot of fights before me. But man, Mike, I was training with the best guys in the world for a lot of years. I was competing with the best guys in the world for many, many, many years. I paid my dues. So when a guy was like arrogant with me, right, it definitely rubbed me the wrong way. And it was in New Mexico. So I took a lot of pride of being from New Mexico. And so I was like, man, I'm going to get this guy. And so I had definitely a chip on my shoulder, and I had all of New Mexico cheering for me because I had my pretty big school in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Everybody came from that. And then everybody from Greg Jackson's, network, right, as well. So the whole place was cheering for me. And, it was, a crazy fight. And it was a perfect storm for me, I think, because he fought in altitude. I was inexperienced, but I had trained so hard in the altitudes and everything else with all the different guys. And, had spies looking at him and at different grappling tournaments and at his gym, even, like Greg Jackson's, he was intense. He was crazy, with as far as coaching and doing the homework and stuff. He was really, really something else, and that was before, right, anybody knew who he was, but he was still that guy in those days. He was still smart. Winklejohn doing Winklejohn things, taking us up into the mountains. Holly Holm was training with us. All these people were there, right? So it was great, and we got the W, and it was we put New Mexico on the map that night.
At the time, I mean, obviously you're living there now, but the California athletes, I'm a Midwest guy. I'm from Chicago. So the California athletes tend to seem to kind of get catered to. It was like none of them really brought their lunch to work. It was that type of attitude. And Javi, I think, in my opinion, at this time, definitely kind of felt entitled. And when you two met up for the stare down, the confidence coming through you, it burst through the screen. Like, if you guys got UFC Fight Pass, you got to watch this. I think you would have changed up your tactics a little bit after watching it, but I think that was a little bit due to inexperience more than anything.
Right. No, I was still competing in jiu-jitsu. I wasn't like a full-time MMA fighter yet. It was, but I believed in my jiu-jitsu, and I knew he was a grappler. So if he's going to take me down, he's going to grapple with me. And so I made it, I didn't know, the tactics, but I knew I could throw a head kick, and sure enough, he took me down. Right. And that's what I wanted. And we made it a grappling fight. When shit hits the fan, right, you're going to do what you know best. And so that's what he did.
Yeah.
And so we made that kind of a fight.
the confidence that you had in your jiu-jitsu, you knew he wasn't going to submit you. And I think that probably only a handful of people could have had that type of confidence at that point in mixed martial arts, because Javi's a freaking stud.
He's one of the best. He's one of the best guys, like, best grapplers on the California circuit. He was the guy, right? And so he was fighting MMA too on top of that, right? So he had his jiu-jitsu pedigree, but fighting in MMA. And then here I am, like, I wasn't really well known, but I was one of the best grapplers in the world, at that time. And so it was a perfect matchup that maybe he wasn't expecting, and he definitely felt entitled. I think definitely thought, that he was, who was in New Mexico, who are these guys in New Mexico? They're nobody, but who actually had the squad, right? And sure enough, time would tell in the future between Greg Jackson, Mike Winkeljohn, like, I was training with all these guys. Carlos Conde was like just beginning, all these other guys coming through. It was really, really special time, and I'm just really grateful and proud too that I was part of that story at the very beginning. And Greg Jackson is like, here, look, he shows me the picture in the gym, of just being part of that, all these legends, right, of the sport, and just to have a tiny little piece, right, of that makes me really proud and grateful.
Absolutely. And just so everybody at home can kind of, like, if I were to set the table right, Romina Sato, in my opinion, he's really the first fighter ever to define themselves as number one pound for pound in the world. Like, you had like Pat Miletich, you brought his name up earlier. Pat Miletich would win the UFC belt, drop a couple fights outside of the UFC, and then go on to defend the UFC belt. Sato was the clear, distinct number one 155er, and Javi beat him. And Javi beat him in Japan.
In Japan, correct.
Good luck doing
that. Yeah.
And
and that was right before. And I think it was perfect timing for me, because his ego was at the high point. He had beat Rumino Sato in Japan. And Rumino Sato was the first lightweight superstar. He was the first lightweight superstar in the world. He was just those flying arm bars, the flying submissions. He was the guy. He was the guy. And that's how Takanori Gomi, if anybody knew, he was the number one, lightweight for years and years and years. But he made his name by beating Romino Sato, and then Javi Vazquez beat him. So it was a big deal, and I think it was kind of good timing for me, because he was, he went to Japan, beat Romino Sato, which is such a big deal at that time, and then he has this this no name, right, in New Mexico.
From Santa Fe, dude, you're just I'm my own coach in Santa Fe. Got maybe 120 students,
But actually I had the squad, right? I had the team. I had a whole state behind me. I mean, I had everybody. I mean, if you watch that event, that fight, the whole place was literally cheering my name, the whole place.
How many tickets did you sell?
Man, for that fight, I wasn't, I don't remember, but, I started with the first one, and man, just, I was so connected to everybody, right. At that third fight. Cause I did most of my camp in Albuquerque.
Okay.
So I actually would stay in Albuquerque so I could do all my training. So I wasn't driving back and forth, because Santa Fe and Albuquerque were about an hour apart. I would just end up staying, in Albuquerque. And so I got really connected with everybody all over.
So Javi Vazquez is the champion. You sold so many tickets that they couldn't afford to have that fight in California. Think about that. Think about that. That's pretty crazy. So you made quite a name for yourself. You fly out to Colorado to fight Christian Carvalho. You win by rear naked choke. Is this where you meet Duane Ludwig?
Where did I meet Duane Ludwig? I had seen him actually at the Ring of Fire events, because Sven Bean, right, was his long-time manager, right? And so we had gone. I'd taken some guys up there. Dan Christensen, I had taken him up there to fight in there, and so we were I knew him, I knew of him, and then I think I actually got his belt at because he said you're gonna get a Ring of Fire belt for for the fight, you know. And I think Duane took off his belt and gave me the belt or lent it to me just for a picture or whatever, just so I would get a belt. And then we'll send you a real belt after. And
Good
he
luck.
did. He
Oh,
did
did you?
eventually.
Okay.
He did. He did. No, he did eventually. Sven Bean did. You know, he's a man of his word. You know, and so he sent me the belt after, and yeah, and then actually, you know, it was some grappling events. Actually, no, you know where I met Duane like officially? I did a week after that King of the Cage fight. I did a grappling event. It was like a pancrase grappling event in Colorado. The week after, 1 week after, and Duane was one of the referees or one of the judges.
Really?
And he had just watched me on TV, and he's like, "Man, you just fought," and here you are competing 1 week later. And so that's what we became friends then, and then we've been friends ever since, you know. And he actually started teaching at Amal Easton's gym years ago in Colorado, and then yeah, we've been friends ever since. I'm like a huge fan of Duane, just of his teaching skills, and you know, he was doing TJ Dillashaw beating the Baral, you know, and the UFC using like basically the bang system, right? Doing the combos that we teach in class against the number one. He was the number one pound for pound guy, right? And TJ Dillashaw took him out. But I'm such a big fan. Besides that, you know, just of how his brain works, how he teaches, and just the culture too with his system. I love it. You know, I love it. It's like, it's everything, right? It's MMA, it's traditional Muay Thai, it's traditional martial arts, it's everything interconnected, striking. And yeah, so I'm really very proud for us to be a Duane Bang affiliate, Bang Muay Thai affiliate to this day, you know. And I think I was one of the first people to call him once he announced that he was doing that, because he was still teaching up at he was still living in Sacramento at the Team Alpha Mill. He was teaching there, and so he launched his Bang affiliate system. He's like, hey, put me in, I'm ready.
I think he's like incredibly underappreciated, and it's unfortunate because a lot of his accolades happened, you know, before most of these people fighting today even started watching MMA.
Right.
His K1 career is bonkers. It's bonkers.
Yeah, I mean, when he came out in those early Ring of Fire matches, I mean, he had like 10 people carrying his belts out to the fights, right? Right. And you know, he would have been a lineal UFC champ because he actually beat Jens Pulver at that TKO event in Canada. Jens Pulver was the UFC champ, but I think they discontinued the lightweight division in the UFC. And so he ended up fighting in Canada after that, and then Duane, like, you know, knocked him out or beat him. I'm sure how he won, but he beat him right after that. So he would have been the lineal UFC champ, right? If, you know, things were lined up in a perfect world. But yeah, he's a legend.
100%.
One of the GOATs, you know. Yeah, underappreciated for sure.
When you were grappling in Brazil, you actually ran into Reagan Penn, BJ's brother, at a tournament. So how many like Americans were down there competing at these tournaments?
You know, so that's man, that you really did 7 pages of research, because BJ Penn's brother Reagan, he actually won my division in the blue belt division in 1998. I got third. We didn't compete with each other, but he did win, you know, and he supposedly had just been training for like 6 months, you know, supposedly. So I was like, oh, okay, whatever. But he did phenomenal. Did everything right. I mean, I guess the whole family they're a bunch of phenoms, right? The prodigies, like BJ, a bunch of prodigies. So yeah. So yeah, he won the toughest tournament in the world, right? The blue belt in '98. I got third place that year, you know, but I kept that going all the way to the end. You know, I was one of the top lightweights, you know, all the way to black belt.
Yeah, everyone always talks about BJ, but there's 2 other brothers that really did well in jiu-jitsu. BJ was the only one that fought.
Right. Right.
So you get your first break January 11, 2004. You go to CST Tokyo. Takuhito Hida, who is of the Pancrase system, very talented, that of himself. What were the pressures like going overseas?
Like I did 1 fight, 2 fights, King of the Cage title, cool. They didn't want to pay, or not that I was about the money, but it was I was losing money to train
Nice.
and to fight. And so I was like, oh, it's okay. I fought Javi, got the belt. Thank you. And so then, I was like, the Colorado thing happened and they wanted me to fight. I was like, okay, it sounds good. That's interesting. Get under the belt. Right. And then Japan happened. Right. And so, who doesn't want to fight in the land of the rising sun in Japan?
Mecca.
So,
Yeah.
right. And so that was the days of the pride and all that. And so I was like, let's do it, And so, Takahiro was, he has a brand called Reversal Reversal. Isami was his dad. And so they sponsored a lot of events. And so he was helping a lot with a lot of the Gracie Barra guys in the MMA world. So he was one who I reached out, I think, to somebody that got a hold of me. And I was like, yeah, let's do it, And so he made it happen. And sure enough, we went out there, brought Amal Easton with me once again. And we went out to Tokyo and did that fight. And it was a crazy fight because the rules were it was you couldn't punch on the ground. So it's kind of like a pancrase. I'm not sure what the rule set is, but you couldn't punch on the ground. And it was if there was no submission or a knockout, there was a draw. So basically what happened was the guy basically balled up on the ground, so I wouldn't submit him. And so I took him down, whatever, tried to do whatever I could, but the guy just balled up. And so I couldn't punch him right in the head or anything. I could just punch him in the body. And first round, second round, and third round is the last round. And I think there was 1 minute left. Amal yells, 1 minute left. And then I hear it, and then boom, I get the armbar. So I was like, oh man, that was great, because it would have been a draw, right? I was dominating the fight, but it would have been a draw. But it was an amazing event, fighting in Japan. What an experience, being a young man, right? Fighting in Japan, especially in those days, right?
Oh yeah.
If you were fighting in Pride, I mean, there was Shudo too, right? But just to have an opportunity to fight was really, 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 really special.
Yeah, Japan was the Mecca at this time, and they're so impressed they bring you back in March 2004 for jiu-jitsu against Yuki Nakai. Yuki's a savage.
Yeah, for sure.
For
sure.
And Chris Cordero strips you of your King of the Cage title. It's a little salty that you're not going back there, but you wind up with John Mahalo. You beat him. And then you start kind of promoting on your own, the professional no rules fighting in Santa Fe. So you're wearing multiple hats now. July 16th, 2004. What kind of pressure is it organizing an event and headlining on it?
Oh man. So Christopher Cordero was the matchmaker. He was the guy who helped me with the Greg Jackson. With the Javier Vazquez fight. And then because we became friends, we actually started promoting fights together. And yeah, so we started, we did a couple of fights, those fight promotions in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I was like, yeah, we can do that. I'll sell a bunch of tickets. And so, I ended up, getting a bunch of my guys fights, right? And so we had maybe 7 or 8 fights. People drop out, but my guys all ended up fighting. And so I think we had like maybe 1 or 2 other people that weren't fighting, but it was basically 6 of my guys fighting, and then me. And so it's kind of nuts. I can't believe I did that. But I would corner all my guys, and then I would have one in between mine. I had some other guys fighting before mine, and then I would go out and fight my fight. And so we did that. We did that for the first one, did really, really well, and then did it again for the second. And then I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. The King of the Cage got rid of the UFC. Well, I was getting noticed by UFC, and they wanted me to go over to fight. And so Joe Silva was reaching out to me already. But then they got rid of the lightweight division, And so I was like, oh man, I didn't really see a future. So I just really focused on work. I wanted to have a family. And so I wanted to be able to provide for my family. And so I love jujitsu. I love, love martial arts, and I wanted to, try to do it as a living. And so I just, like same thing, same principles, Think and Grow Rich book, gain specialized knowledge. And so I studied with the guys I knew what they were doing, like the karate and taekwondo guys that had good businesses, and just tried to learn and implement it for jujitsu and, and MMA. And so that's what we did. And we did pretty good. I really focused on that for a couple of years. And then I met my wife, and she's Armenian. So she's from LA, from Glendale. And, she moved out there. And then once she got pregnant, we ended up, moving over here. And so, we built up the schools, and, I had my black belts take it over, and then came out to LA. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to do another school again because it's so much work, but I did have unfinished business. Joe Silva was, trying to get me to go to the UFC. So he was asking me. So that was on the plate, right? And, the Ultimate Fighter was happening, I think the 4th season with Nate Diaz and all those guys. But my son was going to be born. So I decided to not do it, for that one.
You didn't interview. Did you interview for it?
I interviewed, and then I just ended up like not doing it, because I would have been gone for the whole, my son being born and just all the stuff.
So in 2004, before we get to that, you were supposed to fight Rich Clemente in the Euphoria tournament. And I read that you had, actually I was there. I had heard that you tore your retina, or you tore something in your eye that pulled you out of the tournament.
That's right. I broke my orbital, right? Didn't I break my orbital? No, when was that?
This was 2004. It would have been October 15th, 2004. I remember, because I was hoping to see you fight. That was
in Canada, right?
No, I want to say it was in Atlantic City. Henry Matamoros stepped in.
Okay. Yeah. I usually don't get injured, but I got injured that time for that.
How do you break an orbital, practicing? Is it just kind of
No, I didn't break my orbital. That was another time. I broke my orbital when my UFC debut, when Roger Huerta threw that elbow on my eye. I thought that you were talking about that, but because I had to wear a face mask for a while, but I was blind, and I would look down in that area for a bunch of months, and we didn't know if the vision was going to come back. But that was another just a freak thing, I think the glove kind of scraped my eye, It's probably one of those stupid Harbinger gloves, before the John Wano made the UFC glove.
Yeah, the Harbingers sometimes have a little metal thing.
Right, exactly. Yeah,
in the palm.
I think my eye got scraped, and I didn't think it was. I thought I just got whatever, got rubbed, whatever, and then it was an issue, right? And then I'm like, oh shit, I have to go to the doctor, and then you have a scratch, blah blah blah. So it's something like that, And
that's what it is.
Yeah, to take a rest.
At this point, you'd kind of, I don't want to gloss over it. You literally sold everything to move to California. So you had a huge business in Santa Fe. You've got a huge name for yourself. And you know what, man? You're a big fish in a small pond.
Mm-hmm.
But that pond is a decent size with Santa Fe. And it's pretty shocking that you would just go and move to probably the most jiu-jitsu dense area in the entire country.
Yeah. Santa Fe is, it's the capital of New Mexico, but it's a small city. There's only 60,000 people there. There's not a lot of money, but it was my hometown, and a lot of history there with my family. And then we actually opened up a second school in Albuquerque that did really well. We did ads on the Ultimate Fighter when Diego Sanchez, and so I was trying to pay attention and try to do good 100%. Things.
Yeah.
And it was a big deal. It was a big deal for my family because, I had a lot of roots laid down there, and it was very challenging moving to LA and restarting from scratch. It was very difficult, but, my wife has a big family. It's like that movie, My Big Fat Greek Wedding. And so I thought it would be better for my kids, for our kids to be here. Happy, mom's happy, the kids are happy, so
figure it out.
So
You know,
yeah,
you
so
got
I started from scratch. Yeah. And I got to fight and answered the call from Joe Silva and made the fight happen and then just pursued that for a few years, just fighting.
In 2005, you did the ADCC trials. You beat Steve Graneri, you beat Remy Bokai, and Javier Vazquez, and you guys pretty much go 1-1 at this point. Javi pulls out. You get the invite to the ADCC World Championships, May 28, 2005. That is quite an honor to be invited there. What was your ADCC experience like?
Oh man, it's I wasn't sure if I was going to get the invite. I cut down to 145, which is a big deal for me, and so I cut all that weight. And then for the trials, and then I did okay when I weighed in when I did the Canada thing. We had a great fight. It was like voted best fight of the North American trials.
Right.
Back in those days, like only the best guys got invited. The best guys from US, best guys from Canada, and they paid for your trip to go out there. And then I wasn't sure if I was going to get the call, and so I was working a lot, but I was I had it in the back of my mind, and then ended up just doing like a camp. I went down to Brazil and trained down there, and then came back, and I had some weight issues flying back, because when you fly, you kind of retain like an extra pound. I didn't know it was going to be like a whole pound. Kind of had a hard time getting it off, and so I actually had weight cutting issues, and I got kind of sick cutting for that ADCC in 2005, and it was before I knew about IVs and those kinds of things, but I got really sick. I was totally totally like just had a hard time dropping the weight, and so my performance suffered from that. The next day, I was totally dehydrated, and I wasn't focused, my mind wasn't there, so it was a bit disappointing, just
Wow.
I wanted to go back, but it's
Look
man,
who you
it's
drew.
all life.
Look
he
who you
ended up
drew.
doing he ended up doing really well. I think he got like third place in that thing.
Rob DeCenzio goes on a crazy run. Starts with you, Gilbert Melendez. He beats Gilbert Melendez 8-2. Beats Barrett Yoshida.
Yeah.
He lost to Fiatosa 6-4. Like it was, it's a legendary run. And Hadger Gracie's.
Yeah, because he was a like a no name, right? He was a no name kind of at that time, but then he became a name for after doing that.
Yeah. It was Hadger Gracie's year, but there's a few other people that had, Jacare. There's a couple of people that had some legendary runs.
Marcelo Garcia as
for
well.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'd even say Jake Shields had a fantastic run as well.
Diego Sanchez, I had some great matches there.
Yeah.
It was a fun one. It was the first. Yeah, it was the first one at the Pyramid.
Pyramid. Yeah. So at the time I was working for ADCC, and like that, it was like the debut of that new logo, and I helped design that, and it was just like one and done. Like it was just like I thought it was really cool. I'm like, shit, it's gonna be here for a while. Yeah, they scrapped it. It was
how did they change it?
Well, it looked like Greek lettering. If you watch it, like the 2005 that had the Greek lettering for ADCC, it's the only time they've ever used that logo. I think one of the sheiks said everyone liked it, and somebody had like one negative comment, and then that was it. Like one of those situations. Ivan Salaverry in 2005 also travels from Washington to kind of come train with you. You've got quite a name at this point in regards to almost becoming a hub for fighters transitioning from the mat to MMA. What was your experience like with Ivan Salaverry?
You said Ivan Salaverry?
He trained with you, am I correct?
Yeah, he came to Santa Fe.
Was that Santa Fe?
He came to Santa Fe, and they shot the Longest Yard movie with who was the guy? Adam Sandler and who did they have? Bob Sapp was there in New Mexico, in Santa Fe. So it was really, really great. They had Ivan Salaverry, Maurice Smith. Remember Maurice Smith?
Mo Smith, dude, give Sprawl and Brawl, man. The second UFC
You know,
champ.
and so I learned a lot of techniques and training tips, you know, from Maurice Smith when he was there on MMA, you know, just the way they trained. And Ivan Salaverry, he's just, you know, such a personable guy, great guy, you know. So we became good friends after that, and we got to spend a lot of good time. And Bob Sapp, because they were Bob Sapp's trainers, so he brought them up to kind of, you know, meet other people, meet other celebrities and actors. And I met Joey Coco Diaz at my school, you know, that in Santa Fe during that movie shoot. And he's like, I'm gonna come in one of these days. I'm gonna come in. Well, I'm gonna come in. I thought he was gonna come in. He didn't say when, but he said, I'm gonna come in. And instead of coming in that time in Santa Fe, he came to years later he came down to my gym in LA, and we trained for years. And so that was really amazing.
I had like 15 years in law enforcement, and generally speaking, I'm retired. Generally speaking, I listen to every word. And usually when people talk a lot, he's just like, he's full of shit. I have listened to countless hours of Joey Diaz stories, and you can tell which he's embellishing and whatnot. That guy's 100% the real deal.
Yeah, 100%.
He's not lying. He is what he is. And like the crazy little bullshit that of the stories that he tells, he's not lying. He's not lying. Like he passes somebody that talks that much 95% of the time, they're full of it. He's not that. He's not. How is he in the gym?
Man, he's so genuine. He's so authentic. He's just a real guy. I mean, he moved to New Jersey, right, during the pandemic for his family.
Mm-hmm.
And still calls me. He still calls. He's old school, right? He doesn't leave texts. He calls you on the phone. He takes the time, how you doing, to check in. He did that when he was here too, but he was in the gym, so I would see him. But yeah, he just make people laugh, and just such a genuine, good guy, you know, to have around, and hilarious, of course. But man, I'm such a big fan, and you know, I just got a pre-order. I saw he has a book coming out. His book, yeah. So that's called Tremendous Life of you know, comedian, whatever, something like that. It's called Tremendous. You know, he always says tremendous. So yeah, make sure you guys pre-order it on Amazon. Shout out to him.
Yeah,
because such a good guy. Helps so many people. You know, just really, really big hearted, you know, and you know, he's eating humble pie, and he's very, very open about everything he's gone through. And man, he's really learned, you know, and such a great example of a person, human.
Yeah. Other people that obviously come up to your system and done business with, Orlando Sanchez, somebody that obviously passed recently. Would you mind opening up about Orlando?
Yeah, no problem. You know, I you know, he started with me like from the first day. And so like I brought him up, and you know, he's like obese, you know, he was like over 300 pounds, and he got in really good shape, and you know, put my heart and soul to him. He did, you know, all the jiu-jitsu that he did, ADCC, you know, like did a crucifix. That's one of my moves. The only jiu-jitsu that he did, right, besides the, you know, the anti or the stalling, you know, and the, what's his name? What's the big guy's name? The wrestling. No.
Stalling. I just thought Jeff.
No. Yeah, no, but you know, the jiu-jitsu he did was, you know, I'm really you know, I'm proud of the work we did. And you know, he won the absolute and the IBJF, the blue belt, which is, I think, the toughest division to do. And then, you know, eventually ended up winning ADCC, you know, and you know, it's pretty cool. Yeah, pretty cool. You know, I remember doing the first no-gi training with him, you know, and we had a sauna in the gym in Pasadena, and him hiding out in that gym. And then, you know, years later, he's, you know, kept working, and, you know, won the ADCC, which is, you know, really, really cool to see that happen, you know. But
yeah, correct. Didn't you guys kind of?
Right, he took over the because I switched it over to Gracie Barra, so it was Legacy, right, and then I switched it over to Gracie Barra, and then this last year, you know, his brother was his partner there. He had enough, and so they actually took it back. I took back the location this last year, and so yeah, we've been there for a year now. It's Legacy Pasadena. But yeah, it's a lot of history there.
Yeah.
But yeah, we did good work. You know, he's a really good student and worked really hard, and you know, I'm proud of all the things that we did, and you know, it's sad that, you know, he's no longer with us, and but you know, life is short, and you know,
you know what though, like life is short, he lived a lot of it.
He substance abuse, and you know, he had a history of that before I trained him, and you know, he gave me a lot of credit for cleaning him up, and you know, I was really proud of that. You know, he lost all this weight. He got in really good shape, you know, and you know, as far as I was aware of, he wasn't on any steroids or anything. And then, you know, once he took over the gym. We had like a falling out. He kind of he just got one, you know, you can see in the pictures, gained all that weight and steroids and, you know, cocaine and everything else. You know, I don't want to, you know, his past, I don't want to put him under the bus, but you know, he did some, you know, the best things to some people too, you know, you know, hurt some people, but you know, I'm proud of the work we did, and
yeah,
you know,
of course,
nobody's perfect, and
no,
yeah.
Nobody's perfect. And you know, name your favorite jiu-jitsu hero.
Right.
They've gotten in fistfights at jiu-jitsu tournaments.
We're all doing our best, right? We're all doing our best. It's a sport, right? And yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I will tell you, when he had that little incident with Sean Strickland in Vegas, you know, this guy went by the Cuban tree stump. If you're listening to this program, you obviously know who he is. And when him and Strickland almost threw down, I'm like, man, that's the wrong guy that you don't know like, if you don't know who he is, it's the absolute wrong person not to know.
Yeah, you know, it's you know, the guys, you know, because I was connected still with a lot of the people that were connected with him, and you know, they were saying that he didn't, because he already had, like, I think, like a heart surgery like this last year. He still competed in this last ADCC, even with all that. It's crazy, what a beast. But
yeah,
he, you know, the guys were telling me he would still drink Red Bulls and drink, you know, energy drinks and stuff. And so, you know, yeah, it is what it is, you know.
Did you ever roll with Cameron Earl?
I did. I competed against him twice, and I lost to him twice. He also beat Marcelo Garcia twice. Marcelo Garcia
is 1-3. Marcelo's like 1-2 against him, I should say.
Yeah. So he tapped out Marcelo Garcia, right? And you know, I went to, you know, because I would compete everywhere, and one of the places when I was in brown belt was I would, you know, compete twice as brown belt. There weren't that many brown belts at the time, so we were competing against them in NorCal, and we exchanged some footlocks in those days. And man, like, he got my foot, and like, I didn't tap, and I kept going, and you know, he's a tough guy, you know, and he was always seemed kind of off. You know, it seemed kind of off, like there was like something different about him. And then I don't know if you heard about like what happened with him like years later, but you know, yeah, he's like went to jail. He's in jail. Yeah, he's in prison for, you know, for I don't even know what doing what he's, you know, attacking. Yeah,
he's in jail for a lot.
Yeah, he's in jail for a lot. And I mean, what's that guy's name? Jeff Glover. And if you know Jeff Glover, he kind of pointed out, what's the guy's name? The guy in LA. He would go into people's houses and get women, you know, attack women. What was his name? The Strangler. You
talking about Stan Berkowitz or?
No, it was another guy in LA. He would break into the women's houses and then, you know,
make himself at home.
Ramirez. What's his last name? Ramirez.
Oh, yeah, the Night Stalker. Yeah, Richard Ramirez.
The Night Stalker, man. Yeah, man. If you look at the Night Stalker, like in the prison gown, like in, you know, in the court
with the pentagram
picture. Yeah. If you put a picture of him and Cameron Earl, there's a picture of Cameron Earl without hair and this guy with hair. It's the same guy. And supposedly, this is like Jeff Glover. Jeff Glover was the one who we don't know, right? But it's the same year, I guess. You know, I guess his mom Cameron Earl's mom was, was attacked, and those years of the Night Stalker, right? And so it looks just like him.
So
And then
Gabe
sure enough,
Rudiger,
the same thing.
Gabe Rudiger, one of your friends,
Right.
lived with him for a little bit.
Oh my God. Yeah.
He like in our interview with Gabe, he's like, dude, it was the most frightening part of my life. He's like, I was afraid to be around him, and I had to live in the same house as him. He was, I can't even imagine that.
I've heard stories. Yeah. Scotty Nelson, from On the Mat.
On the
Those
mat,
guys.
Jesus.
Yeah. So all those guys would tell me stories. He was, you never know what was going to happen if you, spending time with him.
Wow. Did you ever party with Andy Anderson?
Andy Anderson. No, who's Andy Anderson?
One of the beginning guys of the UFC.
Okay.
Selling lots of coke at like strip clubs in Texas. And ended up catching a federal case. Real fast.
Wow.
Okay. You didn't catch that. All right. You also competed against Jack McVicker, who is a Midwest kind of a guy that's got his fingerprints everywhere in the Midwest, and the Arizona State Championships. I think you won that twice.
Yeah, man, that's good. That's good. That's good work, man. That was I think that was my last gi match before I really committed to MMA, like just full-time training. But Jack McVicker, yeah, he's what a beast, man. He's like a 20-time world champion. Like he's like legit legend, right? What a guy. So yeah, what an honor to have a match with him back in those days. Get the win, but yeah. I competed against everybody, everywhere. So it was that was cool.
Roger Huerta, we touched on it a little bit. Roger Huerta, you had 2 years off from mixed martial arts when you took a fight against Roger, and Roger is the rising star in the UFC. Did you feel like you came in as a B-side, or they were hoping to get him beat?
No, I think now looking back at it now, I think it was a good matchup for him because I hadn't fought for a couple of years, and I didn't have my team. I was out in LA, and I was trying to find my rhythm. I thought I could do my training out here, and not, have to go to New Mexico and look in the hindsight, it's 2020, but Greg Jackson, right? That would have been the right thing. I could have maybe pulled it off then, but I called Maurice Smith, and he told me, do a warm-up, do a tune-up fight before you fight in the UFC. He told me, but I didn't listen. And so I think they set me up. Yeah, it is what it is. Yeah, he was on the cover of the Sports Illustrated. He was the rising star, a lot of things, right?
Yeah, he had a falling out with the UFC. They just kept making him do press. But you also, did Sean Alvarez bring you over to Ray Longo's to work out for this fight?
Sean Williams. Yes, I went over there. Yes, I did. How'd you know about that?
Hey, dude, I'm the MMA detective, bro.
Man, straight up. Is that your? That's crazy.
Well, that's
how do you know these?
Yeah, so that's kind of like this. You're like our 154th episode. We do this with everybody. So it's usually Lytle and I.
Wow, man.
Yeah.
Wow. So for that fight, we went to New York and trained with Danaher and got his opinion on the strategy, tactics, what I should be doing. And then we went to Ray Longo's gym in Long Beach and hung out with Matt Serra and trained at his gym and trained with a couple guys there, got bounced around, right? But I didn't really have like my camp, like MMA camp. And so I think that's what I was missing, that I was kind of needing. I had a lot of jiu-jitsu guys around me, but not really, the full, the MMA camp, like the full thing, right? The full spectrum. I had Edmund Tarverdyan, the Ronda Rousey's coach, in my corner.
Oh, you did? That was him?
I did. I was his first guy in the UFC. Yeah. So I was his first UFC experience,
Well, he's a big judo guy. So
he was like a striker. He was a striker. So he was like my striker, but I liked how he thought about things. So that's why I kind of ended up kind of like having with me, and then I had my grappling guys, but I needed like somebody with the background, MMA background, that was definitely missing that. And so after that fight, I ended up started to train at the Team Quest, with Dan Henderson and those guys there.
Of course, you mentioned Danaher. What was your? You've been to Greg Jackson. You kind of saw what he became. Danaher is kind of the same exact level for jiu-jitsu. Did you know that he was going to be where he's at today back then, based on your experience?
I mean, all the stuff from Amal too, because he would go and train out there, and then he would always be coming back with techniques, from Danaher, and those guys, and so, and it was always like just cutting edge stuff, from the shoulder controls to the side control stuff, just super like high level, And so I because of that, I knew, and he'd always tell me like, hey, don't show this stuff to anybody, And it's like, yeah, no problem,
Cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's
cool.
Yeah.
And so I knew because of that, I knew he was different. And then when I went out there, I wanted to see the match, watch the matches and his fights, and then give me like a good game plan for me to do. And so he did. And so, he gave me his thoughts on what I could do to get a submission or be able to implement my jiu-jitsu,
Dude, you showed a lot of heart in where to fight. Like it's not an easy one to watch, but dude, I think about 80% of that locker room would have gone out a lot faster than that of yourself. You refused to quit. You rode out on your shield. You made the referee call it. It's a heroic performance. You can tell a lot by a person how they react in a loss, much more than you ever will in a win.
Yeah, it's interesting, looking back at it now, because I gave my all, and I fought till the end to win. And so between the second and third rounds, I was seeing like white fog, like I couldn't see because I wasn't getting enough oxygen, to my brain, and I wasn't breathing the right way. And my first jiu-jitsu coach was a Navy SEAL. He introduced me to the TAC founder, the Goth Sonnen. And so he did this whole like watch the fight. He's like, yeah, you're over breathing, like panting, right? And so
upper respiratory breaths.
Yeah. So I wasn't breathing the right way, because I wasn't ready yet, right? Those UFC jitters, right? But it was interesting because of my mindset, and I didn't fight to not lose, right? I fought to win. I fought to win, even in the third round when I couldn't see, I was blind from the fog and everything else. I still fought to win, and I had actually a submission in place. I just didn't have the juice to squeeze, right? And then the Huerta having experience, used the teleprompter to see where I was at, and broke my orbital. But it was amazing. I did my best, and I'm proud that and I fought, I really literally gave my all to fight to win till the very end, and went out on my shield, like you said, and then I got to meet Scott Sonnen, the TACFit founder, which really helped me later on in my life, and I wouldn't have had that if that didn't happen.
Yeah, it's strength and conditioning. Yeah, he started with strength and conditioning with you, and Huerta was the UFC golden child at this point, and you really got to see what he was made of in the fight with that of yourself. You never laid down. Like it's something you should be proud of. That's something to be proud of.
Thank you. Yeah.
So Kurt Pellegrino, real bad matchup, American Top Team. They really wanted you. They had you mapped out. Then you go up to Canada, Ultimate Cage Wars. Simeon Marini, man, dude, you're down 3 in a row right now. Where is your head at?
So I was waiting after my, my getting cut from the UFC after the second fight, right? Kurt Pellegrino, I had that head kick, and then, all I had to do was punch him, but I did jiu-jitsu, right? And then he recovered, and then, the fight went the way it was like an early stoppage, what's his name? What's the referee? The black guy,
Herb Dean.
Herb Dean apologized to me after. He's like, hey man, sorry, I know I stopped it early, but it was whatever. It was for the best. And then the third fight, I was training at Team Quest, and I was waiting for a fight and then I get this fight in Winnipeg, Canada, in the middle of nowhere. I'm like staying in this this cheap hotel. It's kind of sad, and then, Simon Marini, I just met him. Actually, I just saw him again like a couple months ago. It's so funny at a Club Bell certification. It was really good to see him. We joked and stuff. He's like, and he's much bigger now. He's like this heavyweight guy, but yeah, it's so funny. But back though, then he weighed in with like a thong. I was like, oh man, like I just not want to be there. I was not feeling it. Go from UFC to fighting in some Winnipeg, Canada with a guy. It was like, what am I doing here? And so I wasn't too excited. I was kind of bummed out. Just even be there or be in this position. And I was committing to just fighting MMA. So it's putting all my eggs in one basket, and even putting my family in, not in the best position financially. And it was also during the recession situation, right, as well. So it really put our family in a bad place after that fight. So before even, it was a lot of pressure, and then adding that on there it's really tough. Really tough. And I brought my corner. I had Walter Mikulowski and Justin Fortune had some good strikers with me. And instead of doing what I do best, like the grappling and the jiu-jitsu, like hit him, ground and pound. And then when I ground and pounded, the guy got up. He got up, in the first round, and he was still dry. I could have submitted him, and he ended up getting up. And then it being a different fight, went the distance and broke my nose and got all my, it's just, it was whatever. And came home with, black eyes and just like, what am I doing? Going to the family event,
no money,
looking at him like, what are you doing? Yeah. What are you doing? Just my stock plummeting, right? Because out of the UFC, I'm losing out of the UFC now in Winnipeg, Canada. And I'm like, man. And like I was this guy Farid Kader, he was a French judoka Olympian who was just there because we trained at the Team Quest together. And like you want to match up your guys correctly. And so it wasn't a good matchup, I think. And also just the waiting, and then going out there, flying across the country. It's not close from LA, right? And so that's hard on your body. Anyway, wasn't, my head wasn't good, but it is what it is,
it's where you made you where you're at today. Yeah. You mentioned Team Quest. We got to ask about Matt Horwich.
So he was in the Northern. He was in Portland. I was with Dan Henderson. Yeah, I wish I saw. I looked you up and I saw a podcast with him. I was like, oh wow, okay, Matt Horwich. But I almost went to the. Almost went to the pancreation. The pancreation. No, it was the FILA grappling world championships in Turkey. Okay. And I broke my orbital in that UFC fight, and so I, that was one thing because it hurt to look in certain areas. I was kind of blind in another area, and then it was Turkey, and so my wife was Armenian, and so they had the genocide, the whole genocide, Armenian genocide. Oh yeah. Turkey, like she wasn't happy with me going to Turkey, and it wasn't even a joke, like it was like very serious. I was like, all right, forget it. My orbital's broken. Turkey, I won't go, But Matt Horwich went out there, and I heard stories about him. He's, different guy,
Yeah, pretty wild guy.
Yeah.
Were you in Temecula with Sean Tompkins then and Sam Stout when they were there?
Sean Tompkins, no, he wasn't there at the time. Okay. No. Okay. He wasn't there. I think they were in Vegas, weren't they? At the Extreme Couture.
Vegas, but he was kind of back and forth with Temecula as well. He was
okay. Now it was a little bit after, like Keith Sims and Ryan Parsons, Mo Lawal was there, Jason Mayhem Miller, Rio Shonen. I became really good friends with Rio Shonen because he had a family. He had a little daughter, so we both had families, and so Joe Warren. Remember Joe Warren in Bellator?
Yeah.
Baddest man on the planet, Greco-Roman world champion, Yeah. So he had a family too. So it was like, so it was a room, right? Of Sokoju, right, was there. He had just beaten the
Stephen Quadros there as well.
Stephen Quadros?
Was it your gym or was it Temecula? I thought that was your gym.
What's that?
Was Stephen Quadros, was he working out with you? at the time?
We trained together. We trained, and he lives in Burbank, close to the gym. So we've gotten together, a bunch of times, and we're good friends, So, but no, that's the Boss Routines, right? The color commentators for the best commentators for Pride.
Yes. In 2008, that was your busiest year, including moving permanently to California. I got the date wrong on that. In 2008, August, you actually fought in Rage in the Cage. Roland Sarria was the promoter. We've had quite a few people talk about him here. You're smirking. Is there anything that you'd like to say about him as a promoter?
Greg Jackson, all these guys, they used to go to Arizona to fight. He's Roland Sierra's Roland Sierra. He's all the stuff he says is like, it's like what, like his teaching, whatever, the people that he got, the events even, but I needed a fight, and I was connected to the Southwest kind of area, so I knew he was good for a fight. He could find me a fight, and he did, and so that's how I got involved. And I think, did I fight? Was it in New Mexico or was it in Arizona first? Arizona. It was in Arizona.
Yeah.
Arizona. So he got me a fight. He got me a main event fight, and I brought a couple of guys with me as well from my team. And that's all I can say. He got me a fight, and he put on a lot of fights. How many Rage in the Cages did he do?
Man, we had like Seth Begzinski, Joe Riggs, and Drew Fickett. All three have been on the show, and all of them are like, it's like dealing with the devil. Jamie Barner.
Luckily, I didn't have too much because I didn't live in Arizona, so I would just go in, get paid and be out.
That's a good move.
Yeah. So he likes to talk a lot, and I think they did a Rage in the Cage in New Mexico. He came to New Mexico, so I spent a little more time with him there. It was a couple fights after that, I think, or maybe the next fight. And the reason why I spent, because I did a lot of promo, because I was the main event over there, so I had to do a lot of promo. So I got to spend more time and just hearing him talk and stuff. But he's different, right? He's an interesting.
Hang out with Drew Fickett on any on his card?
Like in my early King of the Cages, what's his name, was on my card. He was on the Ultimate Fighter, did the legendary fight with Bonner.
Forrest Griffin.
Forrest Griffin was on one of my cards, but Drew Fickett I never fought on the same card. I think there was even maybe talk that we were going to maybe fight or something like down one of the events,
Okay, cool. All right. Well, we're about an hour and a half. Let me just kind of finish up with December 19, 2010. Lou Dwyer is the promoter. It's in Costa Rica, Extreme Valley Tudo. You fought Ludwing Salazar.
El Perro, the dog.
Okay, so just so everybody knows, I'm just going to kind of clear the air here. He's kind of like the Costa Rican version of Lee Murray. Did you get that feeling like when you fought him?
He had a following. He had a following, right? He had a following. So a lot of people knew him and they paid attention to him down there. But I didn't think too much. I showed up, brought Orlando Sanchez down with me to fight, and I ended up riding. Yeah. I ended up wrapping my own hands, to fight. It was interesting. But I didn't think about it. I just, I had to do what I had to do, to get the job done.
All right. So I'm never going back to Costa Rica again, but I've met Ludwig several times. I think the last time I remember kind of communicating with him, he had just got busted, like him and his buddies, robbing like an appliance van where they like, not only did they like stop the truck, but then they unloaded all of like the dishwashers and things of that. And
wow.
He think he like a year and a half, 2 years on it, but he's out now.
My God. Wow.
You didn't have any interaction
I know that. But there's a lot of crazy guys, right, in the game. Yeah. Is Lee Murray, is he in Moroccan jail? Where is he at these days?
Yeah, at least, yeah, he's not getting out. I think he's had a couple kids since. I've actually sent him a couple letters hoping to get a phone call from him.
Wow. What a story, huh?
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
How much money did they steal? When they robbed in the bank?
I don't. I think it was like 80 million, maybe even more than that.
Yeah, $80 million. Yeah, more or less.
Something crazy. Well, you've got 3 gyms, incredibly successful. The one question that I have,
I did my last fight,
in France.
He's Lou Dwyer, yeah, Lou Dwyer, and she promoted the last fight. My last fight ended up being my last fight, and it was what a way to go out. It was in the south of France, right on the Mediterranean. I brought my wife as my corner, and it went well. And it was in an arena. They said gladiators used to fight. There's a bullfighting arena. Yeah. And so it was really, really cool, really special to be able to go out like that, go out in the sunset with a fight like that.
2 questions. All right. Hector Lombard, you had an issue with him in training. How does this come about?
How do you know these things?
Come on, bro.
Man, I got him we were training at Team Quest, and he was over there, right? And I knee barred him, and then we went again, and I started doing like the move, whatever, and then he punched me in the face, my jaw. And he was, he was a middleweight, I think middleweight, whatever, or what, I don't know what he is, what he was, but I was a lightweight guy, and so like it really, it was like a total cheap shot, And I got up right away, like, what the heck? What's your problem? And then I was like, I just never trained with him again. But just
did you have to be separated? Did he continue? Did he amp it up?
No, I didn't train. Like, it was full on like cheap shot at me, after that roll, I think we were just grappling, but he just threw a punch, boom, my jaw. And the coaches and stuff like came in, and it was just my jaw, luckily I didn't break my jaw or anything, but my jaw was like definitely messed up,
So in my Hector Lombard interview, I only concentrated in Australia. And in Australia, he went from every fight was with a different gym because he was asked to leave in every single gym. And
that was it. Yeah.
In his Kyle Noke fight, which is like controversial because it's a draw, at one point in the interview, I throw names at him, good guy, bad guy. And there's 2 people that broke into his house and killed his dogs. And his dog's not been there. It's possible that he would have been on the receiving end of that. I put one of their names in there, and he just pauses. He goes, yeah, I don't want any problems. Good guy. It's just, he's a guy he's just a wild dude, man. He's a wild guy.
Yeah. I don't know too much. That was my only incident with him, but I know he was asked to leave. He was asked to leave the gym not soon after, I think,
Yeah. Gracie Barra, you split, you kind of started your own affiliations. How difficult was that for you? It's a place where you started. Probably
I was their first American black belt. It's a big deal, I was represented.
Sure.
I was very proudly represented for my whole, since I was a teenager. And then it's very corporate, and so I can't say anything bad. They always let me walk the line, but it's a franchise, so you have to do everything the same as everybody else, and so I think Orlando, I don't know, some maybe they're complaining about because I was doing some things different. I'm always trying to push the boundaries and try to do my best with whatever I do. And so they gave me a termination letter, just terminating my term,
Wait, they terminated you?
Yeah. So I got an email. It wasn't even a phone call. It was an email, right? And I didn't respond. It was just like, wow, okay, it's like that, right? I didn't respond. And like, man, like I'm not even gonna get a phone call. So anyway, I went to Texas and did a seminar at Draculino's, my professor's gym, and another friend of mine's gym in Texas. And so while I was out there, he's like, "Oh, what's new?" I was like, "Oh, I told him about the letter." He's like, "Oh, I heard about that." And he said, "You know what? If I were you, if I were you, I would get out. I think it's better for you.
Yeah, for sure.
And he said that like, you know, our relationship isn't going to change.
No.
And so I think it's better for you. Like, just don't join another big team or something. But yeah, I think it's better for you. And so I called my wife up, and she's like, great, you know. And so yeah, it was really positive. You know, my friends are my friends, and the ones that aren't, like, you know, like they
you knew who they were.
Yeah, it's all good. But it's been very positive. You know, we grew a lot, you know, because of just not having that affiliation like that after that first year. So it's been great. It's been phenomenal. It's all love and yeah, my friends that are the friends that are my friends, they're my friends, and the ones that aren't, they're not. And it's all good. It's all good. But for sure, like I was very proud. I'm very proud of my lineage. Very proud of my history in the sport. I always treat everybody with respect, and I was always loyal and honor, and, you know, a lot of honor, and everybody that I represented. So yeah, I continue to do so and live a good life and do good work, you know, make a difference in people in my community's life, people in my community's life.
Ladies and gentlemen, we sincerely hope you enjoyed this podcast. Fred Hammer, big shout out to my guy, Fred Hammer. You know, we went back and forth in regards to he helps me with getting information from a lot of the California guys. A guy named Crowbar as well. Those are the people that my California contacts that allow me to kind of understand, you know, who's who and what's what. Sincerely appreciate it. Guys, like, share, subscribe. The only way this podcast gets bigger is with your help. And we're going to continue doing big things. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate you guys following.
Check out the full interview on iTunes, Spotify, and all major podcast platforms.